Good afternoon, good morning, depending where you are. If you're on the West Coast, thanks for joining us. My name is Pete Maysmith, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Campaigns for the League of Conservation Voters, or LCV. I'm glad to be joined today by our two terrific national campaign directors, Emily Creerand and Megan Jacobs. You'll be hearing from both of them in a little bit. So first off, just welcome. Glad you are all here. This is obviously a pretty stressful and emotional time, I think, in all of our lives between the COVID-19 pandemic and everything else that is in play. I hope people are safe and healthy. We're really glad that you are making time to join this briefing today, and thanks so much for your essential work in covering all of the intersectional crises that our country is facing right now. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, please submit them through the Q&A feature. We'll have dedicated time for questions and answers at the end. If we're able to answer some questions as we go, of course, we'd be happy to do that as well. Most of the work we cover today is being done through the LCV Victory Fund. That's our super PAC that engages in independent expenditures to defeat federal candidates who stand in the way of a clean energy future, and also we do it to elect environmental champions. The climate crisis is not slowing down, and neither are our efforts to combat it. Our work to defeat Trump and elect pro-environment champions at all levels is more important now than ever. You'll see that we have, and I should also say that Emily Samsel, who many of you know and interact with, she's fantastic in our press shop, and she is running the webinar for us. And so Emily put this together. So Emily, thanks so much for all that you do. On this next slide, you will see what our goals are this cycle. First off, in 2020, we will, LCV Victory Fund and our affiliated entities will invest at least $100 million to ensure that issues like climate justice and environmental health are on the ballot, and we're doing it in new and different ways, backed by a lot of exciting research, important research. So our goals are pretty straightforward, and I don't think they're going to surprise any of you. One, we have to elect a president who will act on climate. That's a different president than we have right now. Two, we need a pro-climate majority in the US Senate. That means moving Mitch McConnell out of the majority leader's seat. Three, it's vital that we maintain a pro-environment majority in the US House. Fourth, we have to help elect more climate leaders at the state and local level, and we do that in partnership with our state league affiliates throughout the conservation voter movement. Now, as I said, we are committed to investing at least $100 million to defeat Trump and help elect Biden. This is by far our biggest investment ever. In fact, it's more than double what we did last presidential cycle in 2016, which was $45 million. And in 2018, it was $85 million. So what I want to do now is focus more to start off on the presidential program that we're running, and so you can get a sense of the Environmental Swing Voters program that we put together. So on the next slide, you'll begin to see who is it that we were targeting with this Environmental Swing Voter program. This is 1.58 million voters that our friends at Blue Labs created, found these voters, these targets around in the 6 presidential battleground states where we focus this program on. I'll explain more about the location and some of what the program was. I'm going to show one ad from it. But before I do that, Emily, just back on who these 1.58 million voters are, you'll see that they skew heavily to women, 8 out of 10. We were largely not talking to older folks. 88% of them were under the age of 65, and more than half of the targets were under the age of 50. Over a fifth were voters of color, and in Arizona and Florida in particular, the number was significantly higher in terms of voters of color that we were talking with. Almost 2 out of 3 are registered independents. These are not particularly high income earners, with more than half are under $50,000, and largely suburbanites, a little over half in suburban communities, and certainly some in ex-urban communities as well. On the next slide, you will see that the states that we did this work in. Again, this isn't going to be a surprise to any of you. It's the top 6 presidential battleground states. It's the blue wall states, so-called, from 2016. That's Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And then also North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. And what the Environmental Swing Voter Program was all about is making sure people understood Trump's denial of science and climate change. We really worked hard to connect that denial of science, both as it comes to the coronavirus and climate change, and that that denialism has negative impacts on voters. We also talked a lot about his dangerous record of rolling back air and water protections. This is a 12-week program with digital ads. Again, I'm going to show one in just a quick second, and then also with direct mail. It was a $14 million program. The first slide said that. That's our largest investment ever in a particular political program, and certainly the largest ever that we've done around a presidential campaign. I should also mention that we partnered with Priorities USA Action for the digital programs, the digital ads, in 4 of those 6 states. That's Michigan, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. On this next slide, what you'll see here in just a second is Emily's going to show an ad in just a quick minute. We ran 37 digital spots over the course of the campaign. And yeah, hang on just one second, Emily, thanks. I know that took a sec to get queued up. We ran, as I said, 37 digital digital ads over the course of the campaign in the 6 states. This particular one ran in both English and Spanish in Florida and Arizona. And the reason I wanted to show this is because it does, I think, a very clear job of connecting Trump's denialism of coronavirus, not listening to the science and experts, denialism of climate change, not listening to the science and experts. So there's that common theme there that's tied together, and then how that's hurt us. Obviously, with the pandemic, people are sick, people have died, and our economy has taken a battering because of it. Climate change, we're seeing impacts in more direct ways, more and more frequently. I'm a Westerner. We're blanketed in smoke out here in the American West, the Gulf Coast getting pummeled by hurricanes, floods in the Midwest, and lots more. So, Emily, if you'd show time, that would be terrific.
For months, experts warned Donald Trump about the coronavirus. While the clock ticked by, he ignored scientists, and we've seen the cost. It's the same with climate change. Experts from NASA to the military warned it's time to act before it's too late. But Trump refuses to listen and even says he doesn't believe it. Trump denies the facts, and we pay the price, while time is running out in the fight against climate change.
Great. Thanks, Emily. So again, that's one of 37 digital spots, and all of our digital spots, we've sent out previously, and certainly will recirculate for anybody that wants to see other examples of ads that we ran. So let's just talk about some of the results of the program. The program, again, it was a 12-week program, started in mid-May, concluded in mid to mid-late, really, August. And Jeff Guerin from Hart Research did polling for us and focus groups in the fall of 2019 to help us understand this landscape, then went back in and did another survey among environmental swing voters in those same 6 states, of course, in August of this year, right as the program was beginning to conclude. On the next slide, you'll see some of the results of that poll, of that research that Jeff Guerin did. And what you'll see there on the left in October of 2019, that there was 22% of this universe leaning towards the Democrat. Obviously, at that time, didn't know who the nominee was going to be. Obviously, turned out to be Joe Biden. Then 14% leaned towards Trump, with really nearly 2 out of 3 were undecided. Then saw a movement, both when we talked to them in August of 2020 hey, 3 or 4 months ago, what were you thinking for the presidential election? And then continuing to look, okay, now today, when the survey was done, August of 2020, where are you for the presidential election? And you'll see that among this universe, a strong movement away from, or not necessarily away from Trump, I should say, but to Joe Biden, which was very exciting to see. On the next slide, I think it is important to acknowledge that obviously when we set this program up and did the initial research, no one had ever heard of COVID-19, and the idea of a coronavirus and a pandemic was as far from anyone's mind as you could have imagined. Not to mention, racial injustice issues rising to the fore in the way that they have since the murder of George Floyd right around the Memorial Day time. So what this chart here shows is that swing voters still care about the environment, that some of the intensity of the issue has declined around, with COVID-19 and the economic crisis that has begun to dominate voters' attentions. That's not a surprise, but just wanted to acknowledge that. On the next slide, though, I think one of the things that's really important about this is we came into this program to educate these 1.58 million swing voters. These folks that didn't know, for the most part, how they were going to vote, either totally undecided or lean one way or lean the other way, and didn't frankly know a lot about what Trump had done on the environment. And so the program was designed to educate them. And what you see there on the left side, that blue bar from October of 19 to August of 2020, is folks that of this target universe, that their knowledge of Donald Trump's record and policies on the environment went up from 33 to 37%. So not a massive jump, but again, crowded media environment with a lot going on with the pandemic. Good to see that number go up, which the program was designed to do. Interestingly, you take something like immigration, that didn't move at all in terms of voters' knowledge. They knew what they knew in October of 19, and that stayed static in essence in August of 2020. And so it just shows, as we were communicating on the environment, there was more information, or that they were absorbing some of that information. The next slide that you'll see that this is especially among young voters, younger swing voters, and people that did not vote in 2016, that the awareness of what Trump has done on the environment, the damage he's done on the environment, went up somewhat significantly, which was really important for us to see. You see both young voters, in each of those three, around pollution and toxics, water pollution and air pollution are these three categories, right? On the left, it's young voters, and then there's the non-voters. In each of those instances, that awareness and knowledge around what he's done went up. So the second piece of results that I want to share are about the folks at Blue Labs who did the modeling for us. They created a model, and they surveyed 3,000 swing voters in these 6 states in March of this year. And then we went back in and they talked to those same 3,000, a little bit less, 3,000 swing voters to see what movement had happened over the course of the program. Some of the top takeaways are right here, that our targets were moving towards Biden more than swing voters who were not in our program. And I'll show this graphically in just a second. And that Trump supporters are defecting, again, more in the target group. When I say the target group, that's the environmental swing voters universe that we spent 12 weeks serving those 37 digital ads to. I didn't say there were 3 phases of creative. So we would roll out new digital ads every month or so, roughly, with those 3 phases of creative. The third point is, there's still more opportunity. There's still swing voters out there that are movable, environmental swing voters that are out there. And not terribly surprising that they have significantly higher disapproval of Trump after this program, and that a lot of it was independents and women, some of our college-educated voters that moved the most. The next slide, I have this on there. I'm not planning to get too deep into the methodology, but I think it's important to show, again, the universe. I said 3,000 is 2,924, right? Again, talked to them in March. We actually went back in April to figure out messaging around coronavirus. and climate change and how to tie that together. Then we went back to them in August to see what movement. That green slice of the pie, the 22%, that's of those 29, 24, nearly 3,000 swing voters, that those are the folks that were in the environmental swing voter program. The others weren't because environment wasn't as important to them. Look, the environment's not a necessarily top issue for all swing voters. We wanted to find the ones that were really movable on environmental issues, and so that just shows that, because this next slide I think is really instructive in understanding what that movement looked like. So this is about movement on vote choice, and you've got a light green and a dark green and a light gray and a dark gray. And what this is about is the light colors, the light green and the light gray, is where voters were when Blue Labs, when we surveyed them in March and then after the program. And what this shows is significant more movement among people who were in the environmental swing voter program. So people that got those digital ads and the mailers over the course of the 12 weeks that we spent the $14 million on, 1.58 million people in those 6 battleground states, they moved 10 points, right? Whereas the light gray to dark gray, people that the same swing voters, but not in the environmental swing voter universe, moved a little bit, but not much, 2 percentage points. And so that shows that there was obviously more movement among people that we spoke with, we communicated with, than folks that we did not communicate with. Okay, I have 2 more slides, I think it is, and then I'm going to turn it over to Emily and Megan to talk about some of our other work. But this is the last thing, that I want to talk about is that ultimately, of course, we have to turn out pro-environment and pro-climate voters in order to beat Trump, in order to put pro-environment leadership in charge of the US Senate, like Senator Schumer, for example, and to win our House races and win all the way down at the state level. And so the good news is that next week, LCV Victory Fund will launch our $10 million Get Out the Vote effort, and that includes vote by mail generation, ballot chase to get those back, and turnout efforts for folks to vote in person as need be. We'll be doing this through calling, text, digital ads and mail. And bottom line, if we don't turn people out to vote, then none of this matters. You'll see here that we are planning to will engage about 2.5 million voters. Now, this skews very heavily to young people and voters of color, folks that strongly support climate and action on climate. We want to make sure that they get out to vote. This will be done, as I said, through phones, text, and email. We'll be doing this extensive mobilization work, likely in 9 battleground states. I'll just tick through. 6 of them are overlaps with the environmental swing voter program, so they're going to be familiar. And then there's some that are in there specifically they're there specifically because of battleground targeted Senate races. So it's Arizona, Florida, Maine, again, that's the Senate race there, Michigan, Montana, same thing, Senate race there, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and will likely be in Iowa as well. I should say that some of those that I ticked through that were in the environmental swing voter program also have battleground and really important Senate races. That would include Arizona, Michigan, and North Carolina. So this is going to be a layered program. We're going to be communicating with people in many ways. Again, heavy emphasis on young people and people of color. Also, we want to make sure that we're talking to folks that might be regular voters, but who do not have a history of voting by mail, given the pandemic and the obvious focus on vote by mail, which you all are well aware of. We want to make sure that we're communicating with folks that they know how to vote and are ready to vote by mail. So the last slide I've got for you, this really just is what the mobilization is all about. So first off, you generate ballots, you make sure that voters are requesting their ballots. In many states, of course, they have to. That is not in every state, and it's shifting. That we're making sure that our target voters who have gotten those ballots, that of course they have to fill them out and they have to return them, whether it's at a drop box or through the postal service. In some instances, people are going to want to or need to do in-person voting or early in-person voting. So we'll be mobilizing people to do that. And when push comes to shove, people have to get out on election day with good, safe social distancing and vote on election day, because this election is just that important. And then there may well be instances of needing to cure ballots and do voter protection as part of this as well. Let me stop there, and I want to turn it over again to one of our two. You're going to hear from both Emily Creeran and Megan Jacobs, our two national campaign directors. But at this point, I want to turn it over to Emily, who is going to start to talk about some of our other work in the Senate and House and otherwise. So Emily, to you, please.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, everyone. As Pete mentioned, my name is Emily Creeran, and I'm one of the two national campaigns directors here at LCV. Defeating President Trump is our highest priority this cycle, but we know this won't be enough. We also need to hold the House, win the Senate, and elect climate champions at the state and local level. If Biden wins the White House, we still need to net 3 Senate seats in order to flip to a pro-environment majority. This is an overview of our major battleground states and shows where our biggest overlaps are. And as you can see, it's Arizona, Michigan, and North Carolina are the states where we are engaged in both presidential and Senate work. And we will also be focused on the Senate races in Maine, Montana, and potentially Iowa. In Arizona, Mark Kelly holds an 11.3 average lead to McSally. The newest Fox poll recently showed that Mark is up by 17 points, and we've already invested $1.5 million into the Senate race this cycle. We ran 2 anti-McSally ads that both point to her vote in support of Trump's rollback of the Clean Power Plan, which would pollute Arizona's already dangerously dirty air.
Hi, and I'm Megan Jacobs. I'm the other national campaigns director. Another critical state for us has been Montana. We've done 2 statewide ads here so far. This race has been neck and neck, with most polls showing it within the margin of error. And public lands is an incredibly important issue in this state, as we've seen cycle after cycle. And Steve Daines does not have a good record when it comes to that. So we released 1 ad on that in August on Daines' record of selling off or his vote that would open the door to sell off Montana's public lands. And then just last week, we announced a $3 million partnership with EDF Action Votes to again highlight Daines' record on public lands issues. In Michigan, another key state for us, water is incredibly important statewide. Earlier this year, we did a joint program with EDAF and NRDC-AF on a $1 million TV ad by highlighting Peter's records on cleaning up PFAS, which is on toxic PFAS contamination in waterways in Michigan. He released an ad on that himself recently, and it's been a big issue in the race, and we think it will continue to be a big issue there. And then, some other key races we're looking at, as Emily mentioned, Maine continues to be incredibly close. We endorsed Susan Collins in the past, but this year we're with Sarah Gideon. We think that Susan Collins has abandoned her record of bipartisanship and has done a lot to support Trump appointees in his agenda that's anti-science and anti-environment. In North Carolina, another key race we're taking a look at. There are a lot of big environmental issues at play there. Coal ash cleanup is a big one that Tom Tillis has been on the wrong side of. Obviously, North Carolina regularly faces devastating hurricanes, and climate is a big issue there. And then Iowa, another key race that we're taking a close look at.
This cycle, it's all about defending a core handful of new environmental champions, but also taking a look at expanding the pro-environment house. The environment is playing a key role in many top-tier house races, as it did last cycle. And our 2020 poll of battleground house districts that we did in June found that environmental messaging, both critiques of anti-environment politicians and positive messaging in support of environmental champions, can swing competitive house races. This past Tuesday, we went live with 1.15 million in ads in our first 3 defends: New York 22, New Jersey 3, and South Carolina 1. And I know Emily is going to play New York 20, the ad that we put up in New York 22.
Now, more than ever, we know breathing unhealthy air puts us all at risk. But Claudia Tenney took nearly $200,000 from corporate polluters and voted to let them pollute even more, putting more people at risk for diseases like cancer and asthma, even as she voted to help her insurance industry supporters make you pay more for pre-existing conditions. Tenney in Congress is bad for your health. LCV Victory Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
All right, then I'm going to talk a little bit about our work in governor's races and in the states. If we've learned anything this year, it's that governors and state elected officials are incredibly important and can make a huge difference when it comes to protecting our health. 2 big gov races for us this year are North Carolina and Montana. Our state league in North Carolina announced a $2 million investment to reelect Governor Cooper and take pro-environment majorities in both chambers of the state legislature. It's going to be a tough race, but it's something we think we can do and have a pro-environment majority in North Carolina. And in Montana, our state league is also playing in the governor's race there. Earlier this summer, they announced a 6-figure TV ad buy highlighting Congressman Greg Gianforte's record of protecting himself and not public lands. Again, like we talked about, public lands is such an incredibly important issue in Montana, and Greg Gianforte has really been on the wrong side of that. Mike Cooney has been talking a lot about that issue and his record of defending public lands. And so we're excited to see that race has been really close, and we have a shot of maintaining a pro-environment, pro-public lands governor there. And we're working in states around the country to continue to flip chambers and build up our support in the state legislature. We had a lot of good success in Virginia last year. We're doing a lot of work in Michigan on the state house, in Pennsylvania in both chambers, and in Minnesota on flipping the state senate. And then we just wanted to call out, we're doing a lot of work with great partners around the country. These are just a few of them. Some of our partners from the environmental world, EDF Action and NRDC Action Fund, Priorities USA, we talked about, we partnered with on our presidential program, and Blackpack, who we've worked with in Michigan on radio ads highlighting environmental and racial justice issues, and are looking forward to doing more work with them. And with that, we'll open it up for Q&A.
Great, and thanks so much, Megan and Emily. Am I getting feedback? Hopefully not. Okay, hi all again. I'm Pete Maysmith, Senior Vice President of Campaigns for the League of Conservation Voters, or LCV. You just heard from Emily Curran and Megan Jacobs, our 2 terrific national campaigns directors. Would love to take questions. There, you can type them in the box. There's a Q&A box, and it's, I think, similar to the chat, but you can place them in there, and then we will see them. And between the 3 of us, and Emily will assist, we'll make sure to start answering your questions. So if you have any, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. And Emily, I might ask for your assistance in making sure that we're seeing any of the questions that are coming in, please.
I feel a little bit like the Wizard of Oz, but first question is from Eric Wolf, Politico. Your GOTV sounds like the kind of thing we would have seen last year, but we're seeing a lot of weird stuff this year, like problems with USPS. How are you adjusting to these unusual circumstances?
Yeah. Well, I'll start, Eric, and Megan and Emily, you should chime in. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of weird stuff. I think that's a really fair thing to say this year. I mean, there's a couple things. One, we want people to act early. You know, there was a lot of conversation about flattening the curve with the pandemic. Well, let's flatten the curve with vote by mail. Request the ballots now. That's why we want to be reaching out to folks, again, starting on Monday through our Victory Fund program, and making sure that those ballot requests are going in absolutely as early as possible. So if a ballot doesn't arrive, there's you know, a chance to react to that. And, you know, both the clerks and the Postal Service, you know, that they aren't overwhelmed. And then the second piece of that is return the ballot fast. Do not wait till the last minute. Again, you know, there's more time to react if something doesn't get in, or if there's a delay in terms of getting it in through the Postal Service. The other thing I would say is that not in all states, but a number of states, there are drop box. And so that's another way that you can just literally drop the ballot off. The clerks or whoever, you know, it might be, come and collect that. There's some folks that are just not going to be comfortable voting by mail. And as I outlined, then we're going to make sure that they know where and how to vote early in person. And then when push comes to shove, there's obviously, you know, polling places on election day. So that's, and then I should say the other thing, I mean, the big thing, Eric, I mean, let me take one step back. In a normal year, we would be knocking on millions of doors in these states that we've just been talking about, right? We're not doing that this year because of the pandemic. And instead we're on the phones, we're texting, we're, you know, communicating through digital ads and mail, because we're not face to face at the doors. I mean, that's the major change for sure. From years past. Megan and Emily, anything to add there? Okay. I can now see the Q&A box. It took me a second, and thank you for assistance in that. Megan, I think this next question, Marianne, you have a question about our messaging in Maine. And Susan Collins says she has opposed some Trump nominees and has opposed the rollback of the Clean Power Plan. She's done a lot of anti-environment activity in both votes, a lot of votes anti-environment. But Megan, that's a state you spend a lot of time being really smart about. So would you like to talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things to that. You know, I think one key point is that Susan Collins has taken $500,000 from the oil and gas industry and then voted for things like the tax bill that has given them corporate handouts. You know, she's opposed a few Trump nominees, but she's voted for a lot of bad ones, like Rick Perry, an open climate denier, to be the Secretary of Energy, or David Bernhardt, a former oil and gas lobbyist, to be in charge of the Secretary of the Interior. And I think, you know, we feel like she has, you know, voted for Trump's agendas and his anti-science climate denying appointees more often than not.
Great. Thanks very much, Megan. Rebecca, hi, nice to have you on the Zooms. I hope you're doing well. Your question is there going to be any sort of focus on elections for state level regulatory bodies like the Arizona Corporation Commission and the Texas Railroad Commission? Both Emily and Megan in turn, Emily with Arizona, Megan with Texas, the Railroad Commission. You want to talk a little bit about some of our thinking about work and connected to those two bodies, please?
Yes, I'm happy to answer your question, Rebecca, about Arizona's Corporate Commission race. Yes, we are getting involved. Our Chispa, Arizona State League and affiliate is heavily invested in that race. We actually just came out with some polling in that race where it shows, pretty tied, but after messaging specifically around solar and clean energy initiatives and items of that nature, the Democrats far exceed their Republican opponents. So we feel pretty positive, and we'll be getting involved in that race.
Yeah, and on Texas, that's one that we are keeping an eye on. Jim Wright is an incredibly corrupt oil and gas insider. And I think we have a real shot at getting pro-environment leadership there. But one that we are a little more focused on, I'll talk about, is the Montana PSC. There are several offices up for that this year that our state league is playing in, and hopeful that we can make some progress there, getting some more pro-environmental candidates.
And Rebecca, I see your second question about other regulatory races. I just want to piggyback and kind of bring up to light the OPPD and NPPD seats in Nebraska. They are regulatory bodies, and our state affiliate, the Nebraska Conservation Voters, feel very good about protecting the majority that they have on the OPPD board, but also picking up seats on the NPPD board as well.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Megan. And Rebecca, we're more than happy, would love to connect you with our state LCV partners in those states that we just ticked through, because they're the ones that do the direct work on this. Emily and Megan are obviously deeply involved, as you could tell from their answers. But they're the folks on the ground, and they can talk in more detail. And obviously we can just do that offline and everything, Rebecca. But if you're interested, just let Emily Samsel know, or any of us know, Rebecca, and we'll be happy to do that. The next question I think I'm seeing, Tim, is regarding the Colorado Senate. I am happy to take a first whack at that, and Emily, you should chime in. I should note, I did already, I'm a Coloradan, so have strong kind of personal feels and connection to that race. This is obviously, Colorado is obviously an important Senate race. Again, it's all about changing who runs the United States Senate. Mitch McConnell has been crystal clear. He will block all proactive climate policy and legislation from moving forward in his Senate. And we don't have to wonder about, whether or not he'll do that. He's done that. We know that. And so we have to change who's in the leadership. That means removing senators, anti-environment senators like Cory Gardner, incumbents, and replacing them with pro-environment candidates, in this case, the former governor of Colorado, John Hickenlooper. That's a race that we're watching closely. We are ultimately, much more optimistic than not that seat will move into pro-environment hands. So at this point, we don't have plans to do any significant investment in that race. It's not because we don't care a lot about it. We want to use our dollars as efficiently and as effectively as we possibly can. 100 million overall is a lot. That's more than just the Victory Fund. It's all of our entities. But that's a lot, but it still is a limited pot of money. So we're using our, husbanding our resources wisely. And right now feeling much better than not about that race, but keeping a close eye. Emily, is there anything you want to add about the Colorado Senate race?
No, you did a good job of summing it up.
Okay. Are there other, now that I've got my act together on the Q&A box, you would think 5-6 months into the pandemic, I would have had that right off the bat. Thanks for bearing with me. Any other questions from anybody on the Zoom? As we're waiting for that, Megan, Emily, and Emily Samsel, any points that you all didn't make that you'd like to make sure that we're communicating what it is we're doing and why it is we're doing it? let me interject. I'm seeing that there are now another question or two. First, Tim, back to you, I guess. Are the state affiliates? Yes, that includes the work that our state affiliates are doing. In the 100 million total. Sorry, I didn't read your full question. Are state affiliates included in the 100 million total? Answer, yes. And then Eric is asking, forgive me, no worries, Eric, for not knowing your history in elections, but are you typically this active down ballot? Texas Railroad Commission, Montana and Arizona Public Service Commissions, those seem pretty far down the ballot, but maybe you do these most cycles. If it's new this time around, why the emphasis? It's not new is the short answer. Again, I do want to be really clear that that work actually happens through our state LCV affiliates. So take Chispa, Arizona, in Arizona, does the work around that, the political programming for the ACC, the Arizona Corporation Commission. And Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about, why that is important and why we're, working with Chispa, Arizona to engage in that race, kind of the value of that?
Yeah, 100%. It's all about power building at the state and local level. And for Chispa, Arizona has a very unique message that they can showcase with these races that resonates with a lot of the potential voters for these statewide elections. And so they are just the better messenger, and it builds power that they are able to have at the state level with policy that comes out of the PSC, and being able to influence that policy, but also shows that they are a real player. Chispa, Arizona has only been around for a couple of years, and so are really starting to dig in on some of these more localized races where they are able to show that they're a powerhouse, and we are here to support them.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's exactly spot on. And given that the power that the Arizona Corporation Commission has over really important decisions that are made in that state about the sources of electricity, that for us really rises to the level of why it makes sense, or why Chispa, Arizona and us, makes sense to be involved in those races. Look, if we're going to stop climate change, and we have to stop climate change, it's going to take action at the local, state, and certainly at the federal, and obviously ultimately we know this at the international level. But that means having a regulatory body that'll shut down coal-fired power plants and pivot to wind and solar. Right? And so having pro-climate, pro-clean energy majorities on these public service or regulatory body type commissions, especially in Arizona, where you have a major utility who has just been wedded to coal for forever and is reluctant, well, reluctant's an understatement, to move off of coal. We need commissioners in place that are going to say, no, the era of dirty fossil fuels is over, and you've got to move to clean, renewable energy like wind and like solar. So yeah, thanks for asking. Really appreciate it, Eric. And then let's see, the next question, Rebecca, environmental ballot initiatives that should be on your radar, and/or fossil fuel industry initiatives. Megan, maybe turn to you first, and Emily as well. Any environmentally connected ballot initiatives that are kind of rising up on your radar?
I don't have any highlights really on that front. It's been a quieter year for that this cycle.
Yeah. Emily, anything on your?
We have in Colorado, there are a couple ballot initiatives that the board and our state league is taking a look at, but none that are incredibly taking the forefront of the public mind right now.
Yeah. Again, Rebecca, more than happy to both stay in the loop with you on that as anything additionally shapes up. But and I know we've talked some and you've covered in the past, but it's not as active of a topic or venue, ballot initiatives, I meant, Rebecca, as it has been in years past on environmental issues, of course, we're talking about. Any other questions? I know we were scheduled to go for an hour. There's obviously no reason to stay on the whole time. We're at about 46 minutes. I just want to reiterate again, I'm Pete Maysmith, Senior VP of Campaigns for the League of Conservation Voters, joined by Emily Curran and Megan Jacobs, our two national campaign directors at LCV. This will be the largest investment that we've made in an election cycle, 2019 and 2020. And we'll be investing at least $100 million through all of our various entities. And it's because the moment demands it, all the way from the environmental disaster that's in the White House, all the way down the ballot. Someone the other day said, well, Pete, does climate still matter in this moment of COVID and everything going on? And oh my gosh, does it matter? Right? It matters in spades. It matters because of impacts on people's lives. And frankly, mostly that is, if we think about this from a climate justice perspective, it is Black and brown communities of color that are hit first and that are hit worst when it comes to climate impacts. We cannot wait any longer. Plus, there is this connection between this racial injustice and the Black Lives Matters moment and movement that's happening with environmental justice. It's always been there. That's not new, but it's in sharper relief now. And so that's another reason that we have to do this. And then because this is the worst environmental president ever in our country's history. In fact, we put Donald Trump on our dirty dozen list. We've been doing it, and it's existed in a couple different forms for 50 years now. We called him the dirtiest of all time because he is. So you put all those imperatives together. That's why, in terms of our financial investments, it's so big. But it's not just the money; it's the program we're running to elect these pro-environment champs and beat these anti-environment incumbents or candidates, as the case may be. So I think we're done with questions. I don't see any more. Just want to say thanks so much for being here. Obviously, if you have additional follow-up, we are more than happy to keep the conversation going via email or checking in by phone after this. Just let us know what you need. The best person to start with is for sure Emily Samsel. And Emily, big shout out to you for putting this together. But she'll make sure to get your answer your questions directly or connect you with Emily Curran or Megan Jacobs or myself, Pete Maysmith from LCV. And Emily Samsel, unless I'm doing something wrong, I think we're gonna wrap this now. Am I on the right track?
Thumbs up. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, take good care. Stay safe and healthy.